eternal creator of the entire cosmos, unfolder of the destiny of man, creator of the divine matrices within man, thus creator of the flame of life, and of the purposes, the total destiny of man. We come before thee this night in the name of the living Christ, asking for the breathing awareness and mental, emotional, spiritual release into our whole consciousness of the chalice of thy thoughts for our advancement, for our admonishment, for our instruction. In the name of the living Christ, we thank thee. We wish tonight to discuss momentarily with you that point of origin which is the beginning of every man, every woman, and every child upon this planet, as well as all who occupy all of the vast ranges of cosmos. Of this we are certain, that the point of origin is in the light. That the light is referenced as the Logos, or the Word, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The Logos as an emanation, or the emanation, or what we may term the founding emanation of all life, is thus the instrument of creation by which all things were formed. We read that God said, now we'll say it in Latin, Lux fiat. I command the light. We find then that God said, let there be light. From a scientific standpoint, all matter in manifestation and all intelligence, the intelligence by which there was engraved in the beginning the living Word incarnate, stamped upon all substance, were all things made by him, and without him, that is the Word, was nothing made that was made. And so this thought is a propulsive thought, because we join in the moment, the first moment of creation, with God. And we behold that if all things were made by Christ, then we were made by Christ also. And we find an affinity, a fine tie, a beautiful tie, between ourselves and the universe. Now, in the ticking of a Swiss watch, or any watch for that matter, we see only mechanical precision. In the creation of the universe, we see the heart of flesh involved with the manifestation of the universe. And we are involved, and it is possible through our union with God, who made the sun stand still at the command of Joshua, to bring us back, no matter how far the belt of time has traveled, to the point of origin in Christ, so that through our identification with God in the timeless or infinite realm, we become co-creators with God of the universe, now abiding in the finite form as the schoolroom of matter and substance, where souls are tried and made, whitened, beautified, perfected, as Christ said when he was threatened by King Herod. Go tell that fox that today I cast out devils, today I heal the sick, and the third day I shall be perfected. Those who spend their time today in condemnation of humanity, in complete contradiction of the word of our Lord, the Son of Man came not into the world to condemn the world, but that through him they might find eternal life, will rue the fact that they have spread the teachings and the doctrine of condemnation upon mankind. Men have such a yoke upon their shoulders, a yoke of condemnation, and it still abides in the world. Even great sinners, according to our Federal Bureau of Investigation, murderers and thieves of all kinds, in their dying moments, they cite, I really wasn't a bad person, they say. I've always had a heart that wanted to do right, they say. But it's true. That's the funny part of it. It's true that people go wrong without really understanding what it is that makes them go wrong. And so the healing, beautifying apparatus of heaven is still functional. I came not to save or call the righteous to repentance. I came to minister, he said, to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, of all that is real. And then we find St. Paul much later, seeing the apparition of the great Master Jesus appearing to him on the Damascus way, hearing the voice of the Master saying, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And today we find people made in the image of God not understanding that it is so. Because our religious terminology today has almost in its founding concepts failed to convey to humanity alive today, to contemporary man, the greatness and the burnishment possible to the soul that can shine in the divine light and receive succor from the living God. He is the same today as he was yesterday, and he always will be the same, because we must relate to him out of the concept of time and in the concept of the eternal now. We hold in our hands an hourglass. We see all of the sand that is above, ever in a state of flowing to the nexus of the glass. We see in the base of the glass all of the sand below, and constantly flowing in a never-ending movement. And we fail to understand that the grasp of cosmos is to be captured in the now. What is happening now? What are we today? For in the now, we not only forge our tomorrows, but we change our yesterdays. The world has not understood the power of forgiveness, not as a mere toleration by the deity of us, not as though God says, well, I'll just put up with them for a while. Either they'll learn or they'll burn. God is not built that way. This is an anthropomorphic God, made in the image of man rather than the image of God. God says instead of burning that we're going to be earning. And if we burn at all, it will be in our conscience and on our realization that there are higher standards to be reckoned with. These were pointed out to us by the Master. We may resist them if we will. Heaven is not going to do anything to change our mind, nor am I. As the servant, one of the servants of God, perhaps, as we might say, the littlest angel, I am not going to struggle with anyone, either in this room or outside of this room. And I do not care what perversity may occupy the human mind. I will serve only those who come to us with a pliable mind, an open heart, and the willingness to learn the techniques that are proven by the Masters, that have been proven throughout our service and throughout the whole period of human existence upon this planet. Just because the significance thereof is not apprehended by some people, it doesn't make any difference to me at all. I will not attempt to entice people to come here to this place, nor do I intend in our projected television series or radio contacts or in the growth of the movement. I have no intention of seeking to entice anyone against their will, and therefore beware of me, because I'm not going to do anything to you. Nothing. I'm just going to talk about the Father's purposes, and if you find agreement with me, I won't even be concerned. If you find disagreement with me, I may know it, but I won't even let you know that I know it. So, in reality, all we are really interested in doing is in the manner of the Master, acting as his instrument, that our hands be his hands, that our feet be his feet, that our tongue be his tongue, that our eyes be his eyes, seeing the perfection that God sees for you. Because God is a God of love, far greater than most of us have realized or captured in the sights of our attention. We have not captured in the sights of our attention that which God really is. We have talked about divine love. People talk about divine love all the time. But there is very little practice upon this planet of the true meaning of divine love. But we must be very careful in this two-edged sword that we sometimes carry, and I'm not speaking of us, I'm speaking of the whole human race. The sword of condemnation is a dangerous sword, because so many people really love to do well in their thoughts and in their hearts, and they mean so deeply to do well. We are just up against tradition, hidebound tradition, which is probably the root cause of most of the problems today. In other words, what a strange tragedy we see before us. That all religion has one purpose. And you know something? I want to go back right now for a moment to our primitive civilizations. And we will see that in the very earliest civilizations of man, that there arose the shaman, the priest, the witch doctor, no matter what he was. What he was a focalization of the tribal consciousness of the people in the early days of the world, that recognized the impermanence of physical life and sought to find some contact with this magnificent universe, the macrocosmic universe, in contradiction to the microcosmic universe and world that we see around us. For we see only a little glimpse of the world. We live in a very rigid world, our own personal world, that is. It is a world that is relegated perhaps to our living room rug and our kitchen table, and then an occasional trip here and there, and we say we know about the world. From the encyclopedias, we may glean a little knowledge of what the world is like. We learn about the psychological world of man, the inner realm. And this is where strange and horrid tortures occur to man. Because people are not really satisfied with what our modern priests, our modern ministers, our people are telling us about the world. They know that there is a missing link. Something in the world is missing because we are not experiencing in the world. Would you mind waking that man up? I realize. I know you're not asleep, but would you please be awake? You know, we're not living anymore in the time when we carry a doorknob and a feather duster, so I have to say something once in a while. You know, if I only was way up in the air like the time the good Methodist bishop was over in Soldiers Field, he was giving the benediction to the World Ecumenical Conference that was meeting there, and he tells this story himself. I heard him tell it. He said that he was way up in this great big high tower at Soldiers Field in Chicago, and he had 3 push buttons, as I recall. He said one was red, one was green, one was amber, and he said that he was supposed to start the prayer whenever the green light came on. And he said that he stood there and looked down and he saw all this big sea of faces, you know. And of course he couldn't make out anybody's face, whether they were ready to throw brickbats at him, what they were going to do. And in fact, he didn't know when to start to pray. And so he stood there and stood there and stood there, and nothing happened. The red light stayed on. And he looked at the watch, and probably 10 or 15 minutes had gone by, and he was sure it was time for him to pray. And so he said suddenly he saw down below one little miniature figure crossing the football field. And he finally came to the base, and so he raised the trap door, and he put his ear down, and the other fellow put his hands up, and he yelled, and he says, "Let her rip, Bishop!" Something had gone wrong with the light wire. You see? And so sometimes something goes wrong with our light wires. We don't get the right signals. We don't see the green light. And so where are we? So we should understand something about ourselves that relates back to this struggle of man trying to reach God. If you want to have some fun sometime, you get a chart of all the religions that have ever existed. And you are going to know that there will be no Summit Lighthouse people in heaven. There will be no Presbyterians in heaven. There will be no Roman Catholics in heaven. There will be no Methodists in heaven. There will be no Pentecostals in heaven. Because there'll only be the universal people that have forgotten all about who they were or what they belonged to, and have recognized that they belong to God first and forget about the rest. Don't you see? So all of these religions stand before us, and they're all supposed to be ways to God. And I hear people saying sometimes, you know, these signposts that lead from Belgium over to Paris, you know, they'll be going every way. One will be pointing to Paris that way, another one to Paris that way. And one points to Paris that way, and sometimes I think they even point straight up. And you get the idea, you become possessed with the idea that you can just about get there any way you want to. And I quite agree, except that some of these ways are more circuitous. You see what I mean? They go around the barn a little bit. And I do believe that the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line, not a devious line or circle or something. And so we need to understand what the teaching of the Masters is all about. You can have anything that you want to have. And perhaps, after many lifetimes of struggle and senseless struggle, you will find that you will be coming the same way the Masters are going right today. You see, you're going to go the same way then. Because toward the end of your circuitous route, you come back onto the straight line. But it usually takes place the next embodiment, not in this one, because most people are born in one religion and they die in it. And they're usually buried in it too. You know about the pews, you know. Some churches rent pews. And sometimes they even rent you graveyards. Yes. You can rent your pews and your graveyards and the whole works. And I suspect one of these days it'll be all done by computer. You just punch a few buttons, and you'll have everything from the cradle to the grave all taken care of, except your soul. And I do believe that most of the time, in this competitive world, the soul is sort of gently overlooked. And that's the most important part. We take care of our teeth. We get water picks and toothbrushes and dental floss. And we really look good, you know, with all these things. And some people get false eyelashes and wigs and everything you can think of and put on, you know. It's all right. It doesn't hurt the soul at all. But the problem is it doesn't help it. And if we'd only pay as much attention to that soul within, why then we'd make a lot faster progress on our spiritual journeys. We live in a beautiful world, really. It's not an ugly world. Nature has endowed us and enriched us with beautiful, mellow, golden sunshine. Probably Colorado has one of the best sunshines in the whole country. But everybody that lives anywhere in this country, even in Boston, they manage to have some days of rich sunshine and beautiful days for walking out in the fresh air. And of course, while some of them don't have as nice a fresh air as we have here in Colorado, I mean, still, anytime you get outdoors, begin to breathe that fresh air and take it into your lungs, it goes to work for you. And it makes you feel better. But we live in a time of bromides, where all of the little sayings, the cliches, and the feelings of our consciousness tend to put us to sleep and make us feel that we are secure and that there is no insecurity. Yet, there's another side of ourselves that tells us that uncertainty itself is an insecurity. And we are not quite sure. And so one man said that he joined about 18 different churches. Somebody asked him why he was a member of so many churches. He said, well, just in case. In case one wasn't working, why, he wanted to be with the one that would work, you see. Now, our religion today is just simply a belief in the immortality of life. We believe that where the flowers may die in the fall and fall in their season to the ground, and whereas the grass in a temperate climate may turn brown and dry, and it comes to life again in the spring. And there is an eternal process of renewal that indicates to us that we just might be around here and might have been around here for a lot longer than we think. Some people say, well, you believe in re-embodiment? Well, of course I do. But they say, well, what's the value of re-embodiment? Because I can't remember who I was 10,000 years ago. And because I can't remember it, I don't really believe it really happened. Yet, Risa Stevens tells us of singing at the Met one time. And suddenly all of the props and everything faded away. And she was in the Colosseum of Rome singing. Now, experiences have happened all over the world that ought to be convincing of the existence of ourselves in the past. One very interesting story, of course, of Shanti Devi, which we tell in our book. I may as well give you a little preview of this, although it's a known fact, because at the instigation of Mr. Gandhi it was investigated by one of the Maharajas. There's a little girl named Shanta Devi, 5 years of age, who told her parents that she had been the mother of 4 or 5 children, that she lived in a certain state, like, for example, Mysore, I don't remember where it was. She lived in this state, and she remembered her husband, she remembered her children, she remembered everything about this place. And so, at the instigation of this Maharaja, she was taken to this city. And she told them where to go to the street, where her house was, and where her children were. They went there, and sure enough, the lady had lived there. The lady had died. The man was a widower. And when the man came out of the house, she recognized her husband at once, threw her arms around his neck, 5 years of age. The children came out. She recognized each one, called them by name. And so it was attested in the Indian annals as being a true case of re-embodiment. It was accepted. People believed it there in India, where re-embodiment is an accepted fact. In fact, did you know that over 3/4 of the population of the world accept re-embodiment? Do you know how many people live in this country? About 200 million. You know how many people live in China? Above 800 million, and close to 1 billion people in China today. And in India, we have around 500 million people, or 500 million. Therefore, we have to recognize that America is not the world, that we in the United States have a little tendency to think that we know it all. And we don't know it all, because there are, as I said, 3/4 of the world's population that believe in re-embodiment. Now in our own country, in our neighbor to the north, Canada, a lady and her husband had a pair of twins. And these twins were killed in an automobile accident with the mother driving the car. 4 or 5 years later, they had another pair of twins. The twins grew up to a certain point in their childhood, and they began to play with their toys, and finally one girl said to the other one, she said, "That's my toy." She said, "I had that toy before Mommy put on her dress and took us out in the car, and we had that awful accident." And so the mother began to question. And she says, "Well, there's the dress that you wore at the accident, Mommy," when they could talk. And the dress had never been worn since the accident because the mother hung it away and wouldn't wear it. But the girls fished it out and recognized it. And they knew everything of the accident and all about it. It all came back to them. The mysteries of childhood, except you become as a little child, you cannot enter in. We pay too much attention to our old age rigidity, the age of 21. I remember when I was 4, I could see angels. Have you ever seen an angel, any of you? You people dare to put your hand up, say you've seen an angel? 1, 2, 2 people have seen angels. We have a book out in the hall there that we sell. It's very inexpensive, but it's a story of a lady who taught a parochial school. And in this parochial school, the teacher decided 1 year after she had quite an experience with visitations of the angels to her classroom that she was going to make it a regular part of her curricula. And so she introduced a daily period of singing to angels on the part of the children. And my heavens, what didn't happen? Why, one child had a learning problem. He couldn't learn. And so one of the little girls went up to one of the angels that had appeared to her in the classroom, and she says, "Bobby has a learning problem," or whatever his name is, you know. The angel says, "Well, we'll help him with it." And so he became normal. And all kinds of wonderful things happened, and that was written up at the instigation of Dr. MacDonald, who knew the lady who was the teacher personally. It was a true story. Several years later, I met one of these boys who had grown up in this school and then came into higher education. And I will have to admit that they were unusual children. There was something about those children that was out of this world. And they were extremely intelligent. And I think it does indicate that there is a difference between people. And if you go out in the streets of a city, not as they used to do in Nebraska one time during the war when I was stationed at a bomber base, every Saturday night, the whole town went out and sat in their cars. Along one street, there'd be Mama and Daddy and all the kids, and they'd sit and they'd just watch the people as they'd go by into the store. I don't think we have to go out to kibitz. But if we go out and are observant, you are going to see all types of human emotions written in the faces of people that prove that people basically are searching for God. And God is searching for them all the time too. Which does pose quite a problem for us to understand. If God is searching for them and they're searching for God, why don't they get together? the blasted religions. That's why they don't get together. Mahatma Gandhi told the story very beautifully. He said the reason he didn't become a Christian, he wanted to be, he loved that lead kindly light. But he said he didn't become a Christian because he said that most of the Christians, he said, took a little inoculation, an injection in the arm of religion. I'm not talking about heroin now. I'm talking about an inoculation of religion. And he said they used that as proof against the real thing. In other words, they said, I'll go this far, I'll join the church, I'll go to church, I'll be good. But they never really had an internal revolution where God came out on top. The human will prevailed all the way. And that's the trouble. That's why Jesus said, woe unto you, ye lawyers. He cussed them out. And he kicked over the money changers' temple. The money changers' tables in the temple. Isn't that interesting? Maybe he should have kicked the temples down too. I don't know, it might have been a good idea in retrospect. But he did not like what was going on in his time. And I'm sure that he would react in our time accordingly. Sure, we're very tolerant people. We really don't condemn anybody. I spent years trying ecumenism. I was trying to be very ecumenical, Let's get along. Love thy neighbor. One of these days, that beautiful master in there that hangs above the fireplace, his picture, that is. I wouldn't want to hang him up there. One of these days, he turned to me and he said, are you through? I said, well, through with what? He said, trying to be ecumenical. He said, from now on, I want you to paddle your own canoe. And why? Because in our ecumenism, we wrote a series of letters to all kinds of churches when we were traveling around the country. We wanted to come in and talk with them, visit them. Out of hundreds, probably, of letters, I can't remember the exact number, one person replied. All the rest of them threw the letters in the circular file. We're living in a time today when unless you are recognized in who's who in America and who's who in poetry, bless your heart, you're recognized in both. But the point is, unless you're recognized there, unless you have a certain income bracket, unless you can do something for somebody of a material nature, or you can convince them that you are just the man or just the woman, that they ought to have a system in their own program, they kiss you goodbye and you meet yourself coming out the door. So we have to go deeper than that. We have to go deeper than the ephemeral surface ideas. We have to go down to the bedrock of the Christ consciousness. We have to understand that we don't speak to condemn the world, for the world has already manifested its whole forte of action. Its action speaks so loud that we can't hear its words anymore. We can't hear its words. There are books written galore. They fill the libraries of the world. They tell us of the meaning of love. But in practice, it's only a theory. And so, today, we all, I'm speaking of the world, not us as an esoteric society. I don't believe in esoteric societies. I don't believe in the inner circle. Yet it exists, and I participate, yes. But I don't believe in it in the sense, the phony sense that so many people do, that they are a little better than someone else. We are all in the same role, the role of trying to humbly find God. And my friends, unless we find God, we have missed the greatest opportunity of our lives. He cannot be intellectualized. Do you understand that? I mean, you can't just sit down and theorize on what God is. Please excuse me. Since I have this microphone, I realize that even my swallows go out into the audience. I'll have to learn to have a switch in the cord so I can push a button and prevent that from happening. It'd be all right if I didn't swallow a tack or something. What I'm trying to say is we cannot intellectualize God. And that is one of the things that we really get hung up on with people. A lot of people want to intellectualize God. They want to try to define him. Well, the closest definement that I can find to God is that he is a spirit. And I like to think that God is a spirit that is an ocean. And I like to think that every one of you and everyone that lives in the world is a drop of water. Put your finger down into the ocean sometime and you're at the beach. Hold it up in the sunlight. You see one glowing little drop of water. Do you know that all of the qualities of the whole ocean are to be found in that drop of water? And that means that you have within yourself a blisteringly beautiful spark of the Son of God, of the Christ consciousness, of reality is right there in front of you. That's you. You're a drop in an infinite ocean of God. Isn't that beautiful to think about, to contemplate? And then we think of that ancient Indian mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, O jewel in the heart of the lotus. And we realize that in the eyes of God, every one of us is a jewel. People have an inclination to think of themselves as the patine. In other words, we have a beautiful, bright, golden image of the Son of God, a miniature babe born in the manger of the divine identity. And now it is covered over with leaves and with silt. With the passing of the years, the image becomes tarnished and scarcely recognizable as a real image. And we identify with the patine, the leaves, and the mud and the silt, and all that has fallen upon the image and tarnished it. We identify with that when we are no part of it. No part of it now, I said. And so we begin to realize that it is the focalization of the eyes of consciousness upon our own self-identity, or what we think it is, that steers us wrong. When we look at the silt and the mud, the patine, instead of looking at the golden image, the vibrant, living, vital image that is within, we are the losers. Because in time, we can get identified with that. Our psychologists talk about the id. Yeah. The it. Or the idiot. You know, the idiot? Well, we're not talking about the idiot. We're talking about the ego now. And they mean the identity. Well, you see, it's hard for people to realize that we all have one identity, especially when they get into the situation like in Boston, where we find the Cabots and the lodges living, and they say that the Cabots speak only to the lodges and the lodges speak only to God. And this is what we find that happens in the world today. That's probably the way Will Rogers would have said it, you know, because he really cut down right to the heart of what was going on. He knew. We were all born the same way, and we all get shoved into the same hole in the Mother Earth, don't we? Come right down to it. The flesh. Why identify with the flesh? The flesh is nothing but the clay vessel that contains the fires of the immortal soul. And the immortal soul is that which gives us intelligence and gives us the feelings about God and about the universe. The ancient memories, as we call it, are stirring within us. We go back to the foundation of the world. Life is utterly purposeless if we're going to be segmented into an area of time. An era of time. You understand what I'm talking about. In order to have real depth of being, to have a flow into your consciousness, to become a vital person, To become a real person, you have to open up those frozen sluice gates that are in your own brain and being and in your own heart, and let the divine water of life flow. And through the process of flow, begin to recognize that you have a backflow in time. You can identify with events that took place long before your physical body was born. And if you can't do this, your consciousness is even worse than a horse with blinders on it. He can only see where he's going. You pull his halter a little bit to one side, the horse will turn his head, and that's the only way that he'll see is where he's going. We human beings have, if we will, peripheral vision. We can see behind our head like the proverbial teacher. We can see ahead, we can see behind, we can see to the right, we can see to the left, above and below. We can see. But there are none so blind as those who will not see. And I'm speaking now of the acquirement by man of the spiritual senses. How many of you in this room can close your eyes and immediately be in the heart of London in Piccadilly Circus? How many of you can be there and hear the roar of the traffic, see the whirl of the lights, and know whether it's day or night? How many of you can see what's going on right now, just as though you were looking into a television screen? Not very many, I'm sure. Yet it's possible. It's one of the powers of man. A power that Jesus had, that the great avatars have, that the masters have, and that many people on earth have. I'm sorry to say, because some of them that have it aren't very good people. Because the possession of power does not mean that you are a good person. It merely means that you've awakened certain psychic senses. Yet, the very possession of these qualities, properly used, can be a blessing to you. You can see without eyes. You can hear without ears. You can speak without a tongue. By location. Many people today living in this world who are spiritual can do these things. Sometimes it's really startling. People can heal at a distance. Jesus did it and had the power. Do you remember the instant? I'll tell it to you if you don't remember it. I think it was a Roman centurion came to him and said, "Lord, my servant is very sick, but I'm not going to ask you to come to my house or anything like that." He says, "Just speak the word, and my servant shall be healed." What did the master say? He says, "Verily, I have not found so great a faith. No, not in Israel." Here was the Roman centurion, which showed that God is the God of all nations, the God of both Jew and Gentile, the God of the whole earth. "Speak the word, and my servant shall be healed." And the servant mended. And the centurion went home, and he inquired as to what hour he mended. And they synchronized their watches. And they found out that when Jesus spoke, it was done. You are living in a time when there isn't anything that Jesus did that can't be duplicated spiritually today. He said, "The things that I do shall you do, and greater things shall you do, because I go unto my Father." This shows the removal of every time in the history of man, from the belt of time into the lap of infinity. There in the lap of infinity, we see the power of God can reach out and span time from the earliest beginning and pull together in our consciousness all of the necessary harvest of proper understanding and the gifts of divine intelligence and put them all into our consciousness today. And we can see through the gateway of the future and the years beyond, because the soul that abides within is a burning and a living fire. It is a flame that is vital, that can never be extinguished by the water of our human emotions. Yes, we are creatures of emotion, which we come then to another part. As a creature of emotion, one of the greatest problems in the entire world, one from which more people suffer than any other, is the problem that I spoke about a moment ago. They identify with a pattern. And that's all it is now. Mark you well. There is a pattern that we create from birth. We create it, and it is involved in me, mine, and I. You see. This is mine. I, me. That's the way we think. And what is this creature that we call I, me, and mine? Actually, it's the I am presence. But people don't know this. They say I, me, and mine, meaning themselves. And the greatest problem of all is the problem of human pride. Did you know about human pride? Do you know about it? Well, I know about it firsthand. I spent many years as a sales manager, and I met hundreds and thousands of people. And I have always found that the best way to sell anybody something is to close your mouth and say to them, Mr. Jones, this is a beautiful business you have here. Tell me about how you started it. And then don't say any more, let him talk. He'll talk half an hour or an hour, and you just listen. And after a while, he becomes very obligated to you for having taken up so much of your time. He says, by the way, what was it you came to see me about? Well, I'll tell you, we'll get together with my sales manager, and we'll see how many of these what's the doodsit we can order, you know. And this is true of people. They love to talk about themselves. They love to think about themselves in their co-relationships with others. And almost every single person has a motive that involves the ego. How can I improve the ego, they say? Show me. They marry because of the ego. They want a wife that does them justice. Everything they do is motivated around the ego. Practically nothing around God. Why then did Christ, Buddha, and why do all the avatars put everything around God? Goes right back to Melchizedek, priest of Salem. Melchizedek met Abraham returning from the slaughter of kings at Chedorlaomer. And it says that Abraham stooped down and paid tithes to Melchizedek. That's a tenth of all that he possessed. And it says in the Bible that Melchizedek was without father and without mother and without beginning of days and without ending thereof. And of Jesus Christ it was said, he abideth a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, priest of Salem, which means priest of peace. We're talking about the power of the masters. We're talking about a power that involves other planets as well as our own. We're talking about a power that involves the whole cosmos. And we're talking about men that came down and talked to Abraham, that he offered them food, and they said, we don't want to eat. And they touched the food with the tip of their staff, and it went up in smoke. No gas jets. They hadn't invented it yet. These were angels. They were spiritual beings. They were cosmic emissaries of God. And the problem with our age is that somehow or other, we get infatuated with the Einsteins and the Marconis and all of these different scientists that have come up with different theories. And some of these have been proven. But we fail to take into account the spiritual scientists, the people who are masters of time and space, as Melchizedek was. Jesus followed in his footsteps, and of him, St. Paul, much later, come along. What did St. Paul say about it? He said Jesus had paid tithes while he was yet in the loins of his father Abraham to Melchizedek. It's in the Bible. We find other references in the Bible to the passing on of spiritually hereditary qualities, whether through the genes and chromosomes or whether through some other methodology. We don't know. But it's referred to by St. Paul in his comments where he said, the faith that is in thee dwelt first in thy grandmother Lois and thy mother Eunice. You understand? So we began to realize that there is a passing on, even in a spiritually genealogical way, of spiritual qualities. So don't sell short your potential as a progenitor. You can pass on good qualities and bad qualities, and you can stamp out bad qualities just as easily as that through the use of the violet transmuting flame. That's why we think so much of the violet transmuting flame. It really is an interesting thing because mathematically it's the 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0. And so it goes to the next series of cycles, up to the 20 and 30 and 40, ad infinitum. You'll always find your 0. In this case, your 0 is very important because we're talking about the whole rainbow complex of colors. When you come up through the rainbow rays to the 9th ray, you get into the beautiful violet. And what is the purpose of it? It's the zeroing of the computer, putting it back to 0. And therefore, as St. Paul later declares, he says, if any man build upon this altar wood or hay or stubble or any creation that is not according to the pattern of the Christ, he says the fire is going to come along and try his work, of what sort it shall be. If it's the wrong kind of work, he says, it'll be burned. And then he says the man will suffer loss. But he goes on and says, yet so as by fire. And so the violet transmuting flame is a wonderful thing from the divine standpoint, because if it burns our creation and destroys it, or transmutes it, as we like to think of it, it gives us the opportunity of recreating a greater work. Do you see what I mean? And, as St. Paul said, I die daily. Do you understand the importance of this dying daily? It means dying unto the ego self. It means living unto God. The whole pattern was brought out in John the Baptist's story, when John said of Jesus Christ, he must increase, but I must decrease. You see that? The human qualities have to go down, and the divine have to go up. And that is the only way we can ever get to God. Well, somebody says, well, what really happens if I get to God? Just wonderful things. When you get to God, you're going to find that God is more than happy to turn over to you the keys to the kingdom. A lot of people think that this is something figurative. Several years ago, Gregory Peck was involved in a show called The Keys to the Kingdom. Some of you may have seen it. It was centered in China. But this is just a small thing. But the genuine keys to the kingdom are very, very important. There are mysteries in this universe that are described in the book of Revelation. And the alchemical keys are given in the white stone that is described as the New Jerusalem. Talks about the jasper and the sardonyx and all these chemical elements. These jewels, the way they're structured. And they have meaning. And they're mysteries. And the average person does not see these mysteries. They're made according to mathematical law. And in reality, they are keys to the kingdom. And the man that possesses them, that's the white stone, has a new name that no man knows saving he that receiveth it. Don't have the idea that God hasn't got lots of mysteries in the universe. But he would never enjoy these mysteries if he didn't enjoy watching people solve them. You know, it's the old deal of the Father, this is the Heavenly Father, giving to his Son the little puzzle. And he says, son, now you figure it out. And when you figure that out, you're going to be as wise as I am. That gets you right back to what the devil told Eve. He says, you'll be as wise as gods, you see. But he described it as the taking of the pill. That little instantaneous pill. We live in a time of instant coffee, instant love, instant everything. And we want instant religion, instant salvation. You won't get it. You never will get it. It's impossible. I'm going to tell every one of you that the pathway to spiritual initiation is the hardest pathway that you can ever find anywhere. It is hard and mean and cruel. In your mouth, it will be a little book of sweetness, sweet as honey. But in your belly, it'll be as bitter as gall. But if you don't seek it now, someday you're going to have to seek it, whether you want to or not. Because if you decide not to seek it, you'll just be tilted and turned around in this world and tumbled upside down life after life, and you're never going to achieve anything more than supposedly 3 square meals a day, 70 years. This is the norm. You'll get your norm maybe. You're going to be tumbled and turned and tilted around. And you're going to come right back to the place you're at right tonight, some of you. You're going to have to decide whether you want to seek God with all your heart or not. Whether you want to seek Him, because when you seek God with all your heart, when you put your soul and everything into it, He will be found, and you will be the one to find Him. And when you find Him, you will be so happy inside. As long as you live in this world, you're not going to find that you're going to make everybody do what you want them to do. They have a will of their own. You're going to have to live with people and try to be as Christ was, a teacher of righteousness. You're going to have to be humble and recognize your reality in God. You see my point? It's really very simple. But there's mysteries, and there are keys, and there are initiations, and there are tests. Nobody is going to come on this pathway unless they have the, and may I say it, please forgive me, it's not very cultural, the guts to be able to stick it out with God, to go forward, to move forward in the light, and be oblivious of all the attempts and tests to detour you from the spiritual path. I can only promise you one thing, and that is, as you sow, so shall you reap, says the law. And when you have enough good karma, when the law of the circle brings to you and returns to you the good you're sending out, why, you're going to have your whole body full of light. Jesus said it. He spoke about the double eye vision where people see with, I'm not talking about 4 eyes, but see with their 2 eyes. And then he talked about the spiritual eye. And he said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But he says, if the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, if we allow our consciousness to imagine that we have light, to think we're very good when we're not, do you see what I mean? If it's just an illusion that we're looking at, then we have all the filters to draw darkness into our world. And when you draw darkness in, and it'll come in if you don't look out, nothing really is accomplished of good. Darkness won't do a thing for you, but light will. So draw in light. Be a child of the light. I want you to claim your inheritance. I don't care where you came from or where you're going. I want you to claim your inheritance. This is meaningful. You are a child of the light. Sing it to each other. Hold the vision of perfection for each other. Son of the Most High, see a blazing sun. You see the point? You are a child of the light. You were created in the image divine. That's the Christ. You were created in His image. That's why He said it. Churches have changed it all around. They think of Jesus Christ as the only begotten Son of God without understanding that this is the matrix from which we were all made. We are joint heirs with him. They forget that sometimes. You are a child of infinity. You dwell in the veils of time. Then you are a son, and to see that son expand, you are a son of the Most High. Let's try it again. You are a child of the light. You were created in the image divine. You are a child of infinity. You dwell in the veils of time. You spoke of God as the Narayanaya. In the ancient caves of India, they chanted over and over again the words of that powerful mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Now, try it for yourself and observe. We are not talking about a power that is not inherent within the universe. This ancient mantra is one of the most powerful in all of India, one you can use today profitably. Together. Om Namo Narayanaya. 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 Om Namo Narayanaya, 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 Om Namo Narayanaya. So the beauty and the sweetness of God comes into manifestation in our minds if we open the gates of our heart and our minds to Him. We will close with 3 times the Om Trayambakam. You who are bhakti people, who are interested in the devotional aspects of God, you will perhaps enjoy this very greatly. All the people here should be interested in knowing the use of this mantra is very constructive. It renews the cells of your body back to the baby state inwardly. It's very beautiful. Om Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivarnam urvarokamiva bandhanam mrityor mokshya mamrita. Om Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivarnam urvarokamiva bandhanam mrityor mokshya mamritat. Om Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivarnam urvarokamiva bandhanam mrityor mokshya mamritat. The sign of the heart and the head and the hand to you. May the peace of your presence abide with you wherever you are, wherever you go. May the glorious peace of your presence flow through days of service and nights of rest. May the peace of your presence keep you blessed. The sign of the heart, the head, and the hand to you. May the Spirit of the compassionate Buddha and the living Christ radiate the eternal love of all worlds throughout your heart. Peace be unto you.